Okay, we'll go ahead and start back up. Okay, we're live on YouTube. Okay, sorry for the delay, everybody. 1 second. All right, we'll pull up the agenda for tonight. Too many Chrome profiles.
Oh, that's dramatic. My background is blurred now. That's dramatic.
Okay. Great. I don't think we need to read the intro. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:09 p.m. Let's go through the minutes. Once again, Larry, as always, greatly appreciate the work you put into the minutes. And I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at them, but I will pull them up. Action items and minutes. Here we go. And let me share my screen. DC meeting, 22nd of March. Okay, there we go. So yeah, March 22nd for our first meeting to welcome Joe. And we discussed a bit about the strategic tech plan, as well as status of the surveys. And we are holding pattern on hotspots. I think Mr. Donovan is going to be joining us tonight just to briefly discuss it. I did touch base with him before tonight. I think discussed accessibility, and I think the accessibility committee is going to make a proposal. And I think we even adjourned early. Yep, we did. It was wonderful. Any motions to revise, to correct items in this? So, any motions to accept as is?
So moved.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll go around the room to verbal votes to accept the minutes as is without revisions.
Who seconded?
Angela.
Angela.
Thank you.
Will.
Aye.
Joe.
Yes.
Larry.
Yep.
Angela.
Yes.
And likewise, aye. Great. Thank you very much. Back to the agenda. We will shuffle things on the agenda. We have a few people joining us. I think we can, let's briefly cover, so we don't have to make love to have Mr. Donovan stay with us the whole time. But I don't know how much time he has available, but I'd love to cover briefly the hotspots. I think we can do it probably more briefly than the other key agenda items. So, Mr. Donovan, thanks for joining us. We didn't scare you away. So as a refresher, there's been quite a bit of discussion around the library participated in a program, a temporary program to loan out hotspots to citizens. And I think we basically were eager to find out the learnings from that program, and because I think there's various different some boards in the town that are more suspect as to whether this is something that municipal government should get into, or government should be as loading hotspots. But basically, I'd love to hear from you, Ryan, about what the learnings have been, what the current status is.
Well, I told Matt, because we did the survey right before you guys launched your survey, and what I guess a big takeaway from the survey was more of our users did not know we were lending them. So it had sort of this effect of it inadvertently advertised the program. And then we had a lot more people coming in who wanted to use them because they had filled out the survey and they had gotten that feedback. So that was the first time, I would say for the first couple months, I feel like we were explaining to people what they were and we had some interest. But then once it was kind of outlined in the survey, we had to develop a wait list. So, I always say this is a good problem for a library to have is when we have something that everybody wants, right? So I know in some of the advisory meetings, we were discussing reducing the number. I now don't think that's a good idea because clearly there's community interest in this. We have 5 hotspots, just to let you know, that circulate for 3 weeks at a time with no renewals. So people are definitely keeping them the full 3 weeks. That's what we're finding. And then we've thought about long-term modifying the checkout, the loan period, and reducing it possibly only based on demand. So right now we've had 55 checkouts of the 5 hotspots. So that means all of them have roughly gone out 11 times. So I would say that's pretty statistically, they're doing very well. I told Matt, some of the concern has been the expense from the advisory committee of this year to year. So we were going to apply, we had actually won an ALA grant for transforming communities, where we talked about doing more outdoor programming, and we were going to make the hotspots part of that. So we ended up changing gears because of the free program that MPLC offered. So we got permission to buy outdoor tents instead. But we looked at sort of a low-cost solution through a website called TechSoup. So we're kind of back there. We're going to look to see what T-Mobile offers libraries to continue in the program. But what we did hear from the MBLC is that they're not supporting the program past September 30th. So we know that for sure. So the free program is going to run out at the end of that period.
Okay, comments or questions for Mr. Donovan?
Do we know what the use cases are, Ryan, for people checking them out? I mean, do we collect any data about how people are using them? Or just the standard use cases?
So we had asked, because there was kind of a breakdown in the survey a little bit of like, are you checking them out because you need internet, right? And there were, I think we got about four to six responses. I have to go back and look at the data, and I can share that with you, Angela. So there were a few people who said that they needed it.
Okay.
I needed it when I borrowed it for because my internet was out for a day or so. So I mean, I was a big fan of it then because it could keep my household on the internet during that period.
And there's been a couple of cases like that because there was an internet. We did have a run on them. I'll say the day that William came in, because he wasn't the only person, I think, who lost internet that day, or we had people who were coming in to use the library's Wi-Fi, right? So this right here helps to sell the case for them a little bit. I would say we're not asking users, if there's people want to volunteer, I would say I like to have conversations with people. We do talk to them about how it's a new program and how we're thinking about whether or not we were considering, I think at one point, whether or not we wanted to continue it. I can say one of the pieces of feedback we got a couple months ago was that there was a lot of concern whether or not non-residents were using this. That is something I've been kind of keeping an eye on. I can tell you that it's mainly Southborough people. I think it helps that this program is available in other communities. Like most libraries across the state took advantage of it. So they have hotspots at their own sort of lending libraries. Non-residents have used it, but it's something like less than 10%. So it's pretty low.
Do you happen to know what other neighboring towns that have been participating in this program, which ones of those neighboring towns will continue on their own and decided, hey, they've liked it and they are going to continue funding this?
I know Marlborough is looking at continuing it. I think it has helped because they're a library that's currently under construction. So the access to their temporary location is not the same as to their prior building, right? So I think it's like the library itself is more mobile. So that has helped kind of with that. But they have had a big, they got a lot of them. And then they've had a big response in having them checked out. And it's at the same in Shrewsbury. So I met some of the directors on Monday, and I don't think anybody was looking at discontinuing the program. I think a couple of people are disappointed MBLC is not going to be paying for it anymore. That's what I heard. So they may be reducing the number as well based on budget concerns. I know Marlborough, the library, has had a number of budget cuts in the past couple of years. So that's a factor, I think, in how they're going to continue, but they're interested in keeping it going. The MBLC is also allowing libraries, like through their book budgets, because it's a circulating material, to count that towards a materials expenditure requirement. So that's a big deal for us too. I separated out the cost of the hotspots like it was a recurring service cost. And now they're saying that you can kind of look at this as like it's any other material, like it's a DVD or a book. So that's how they're qualifying that expense now. I think that's going to help a lot of libraries continue the program, because if they want to maybe buy a little bit less ebooks, but devote money into hotspots, that right there helps. They can statistically count it that way.
Do you have any ability to restrict whether certain materials within the library are consumed only for Southborough residents versus open to any library in the system?
I mean, we probably, like logistically, we probably could do that, Matt, but we don't philosophically, because we're a library of the Commonwealth. We like everybody to participate in the library. We cannot, what I can tell you is the statistics we generate, if we don't allow all Massachusetts residents to use our services, then we can't statistically count it on our state report. So that is part of the reason why we've opened up museum passes in the past couple of years. Museum passes are very similar to this in that they are sort of a non-standard item, right? What I can tell you is that since opening it up to non-residents, there hasn't been like all of these people from other communities who are like, wow, I can take out Southborough passes. And then I don't think that's restricted the ability for Southborough residents to get it. We look at the statistics of museum passes in our decision, at least from the Friends, because the Friends group pays for a lot of them. If they're not being used, they cut the passes. So then it was like this catch-22, right? Like they're not getting usage, but we're kind of like restricting them to who can use them. And then I would say opening it up has not created a problem. I don't think it would with the hotspots as well. One of the things about the TechSoup program I can tell you is that it's cheaper. There's like a maximum number of 11. So we are considering getting more of them, which I think would open it up and potentially solve this problem. But I don't think we have a problem, just because the wait list hasn't been long. People get a hotspot relatively quickly at the moment.
The reason why I ask the question is I think there's a general, and this is something that an area I know nothing about, that I'd love to learn someday, Ryan. I sit down with you and learn how the interlibrary loan, because I can see that if some facilities have a very high value asset and other facilities don't have that asset, then there's going to be, probably a draw for those facilities. So, for example, if we were the only ones in the local, Metro West area loaning hotspots and no other libraries were, there'd be a run on our hotspots from neighboring communities. We've seen this with other town resources. I know recently there's been quite a bit of discussion in the select board around things like our fields and our reservation of our fields. And we, some Southborough residents, rightly so, are not happy that their tax dollars are going to pay for these fields, and then they are unable to get reservations in the field because very quickly after the reservation system opens them up, they're reserved, and majority of the reservations are for surrounding areas because we have some decent, nice fields that have been invested in. So we just need to give it some thought and anticipation, just in case we for some reason have this thing and nobody else has it, and anticipate maybe residents might not be happy. But it sounds like it's not an issue right now. So.
And I honestly, I think a lot of our bigger neighbors, like Marlborough and Shrewsbury in particular, I don't see them not continuing this program in some form. If anything, we're going to have less of them, right, than they would because of our more limited resources and size. So clearly, I think this is a statewide initiative, means that it's on people's radar. I think if it was successful in those libraries, they're going to continue it as well. And I would just say, for the people who are really concerned about the expense, we did get this over a year for free. So,
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, is it was paid for. It was paid for by, ARPA funds. That was how the MBLC kind of distributed them to everybody. But I always try, I said this to advisory, I'll say it to you guys. I always try to find the low cost, no cost solution. I always try to find a bargain. So I think I will try to make these available to the public as affordably as we can. And I will also make sure that residents are getting them if they want them.
Ryan, when you say affordably, are you going to charge for these then?
No, I mean, when we have to pay the subscription costs on the library side.
Okay, but do other libraries charge for these or not?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know any library that asks people to pay for them. We call them sort of like our more than books. So it's anything that's sort of what I call a non-standard item, right? So like we loan telescopes, we loan garden kits as part of a grant. So puzzles and board games have been extremely popular, like the hotspots. So we're kind of going into, things that you might not buy for yourself, but you might want, for recreational use. I think with the internet, there's a couple of people who have used it because, their internet went down at their house or they need it. So I think that makes this a pretty important resource.
Do you take donations of puzzles and board games then?
We do.
Oh, okay.
Finally found something to do with that Chutes and Ladders that you had.
Well, I'm still using that to try and keep my brain active, Larry. Why is your video off, by the way?
Oh, I didn't even notice. I apologize.
Okay.
I was going to say you look pretty good.
Any other questions for Mr. Donovan?
Just out of curiosity, Ryan, I know that initially the program was intended to be more for I think low economic folks who maybe couldn't afford internet, but it doesn't sound, I guess, like that's actually the usage that you're getting. And it doesn't sound like there's any qualification to try to make sure that the devices are going to that community. Is that a concern for you, or how are you thinking about that?
I mean, I think that was why I started with 5, because I really didn't think, that was the lowest number we could get to opt into the program. And this had been requested in prior strategic plans, like it had come up in surveys before, is that people had seen them at libraries or they'd used them at other libraries and they were interested in having them there. We have a new youth services librarian named Mariana, who's fantastic. We are looking at doing more and more outreach with the schools as they kind of get back to normal post-COVID. So I think, we're going to find opportunities in particular for maybe families and individuals who do not have access to internet. I know that the schools can help too, but I think that the public library can maybe help bridge a gap there. So it's a misnomer because we looked this up in the census data, the most recent federal census data, that there are households in Southborough that do not have internet. There's not a lot of them, but I think there's enough of them that if we advertise this program, we make people aware of it, that at least they have another option.
Okay,
So
great.
it's in the
would
back of
recommend,
my mind, Angela. It's a good point to bring up, and it's something that I am thinking about as we move forward with it.
I would recommend in terms of political support for these hotspots. I think as long as it's considered something that you're not competing with commercial services, as it's just like any other library item was 2 to 3 weeks. It's a temporary, you can't renew it. Then it makes complete sense. It's complementary to commercial services. Even for the low income residents, there are available options that are ultra low cost, $10 a month for basically internet from Verizon or Comcast or Charter. That's what I found. As long as you can show you have low income, etc. So ultra low cost, and that's sort of a long term solution that we should point people to and so forth. I think that there would be not much support from residents, or some very vocal anti-support from residents, if they thought that this was meant to supplant, compete with that internet, especially when these service providers already offer ultra low cost internet options. So that's my recommendation. It looks like we have a question or a comment from Mr. Litz. I'll allow him to talk.
Hi, guys. So I'll just make 2 comments on this. I wrote a letter of support for the grant that originally set this up. And I think one of the thoughts, besides what Ryan has been talking about, was that these also can be handy for people who have events, outdoor sorts of occasional things. The other point I wanted to make is that, there's been a lot of discussion about this as though it was a high dollar item. And as far as I know, we're talking very small amounts of money. I'll let Ryan give you the exact number. But I think it's also important from the point of view of context, that we're not talking about $1 million a year. We're not talking about $100,000 a year. We're not talking about $10,000 a year. And we're not talking about $5,000 a year. So, I think,
Yeah.
we need to look at what Ryan has talked about in terms of value in the context of, well, so what do we cost? What's it costing? What's the return on investment? Both in terms of the dollars and in terms of the time that's gone into talking about this thing.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Speaking of time, I'd love to wrap this up. Move on. Any other final questions or comments? Or I guess final question for you, Mr. Donovan, is what can we do to support? Like investigation into carriers or options? Is that anything you would need help with? Or
Yeah, if it's okay, you were so helpful with the projector screen, when we did that a couple of years ago. So I might reach out to you, Matt, if we are, in a negotiation phase. I should take this opportunity to thank Mr. Litt for the letter that he wrote. It was extensive. He wrote a letter, I'm going to say, and I was very grateful for his comments, because we needed letters of support when we applied for that ALA grant. I'm so grateful that Angela spent time on the MBLC website, investigating the program, because I watched that meeting where you had talked about going there and reading about the background of the program. And just in general, I know Joe is new and welcome, but this committee was so supportive of this. And it was to me, I was excited about them when we got them and making them available. And it was nice to see that the technology committee was as excited for me. So I want to thank you for just supporting this as a library resource and for continuing it. And I'll stop talking now, but thank you for everything with this.
that's great. Okay, yeah, please do let us know if there's things we can do to help and support and so forth. All right, let's go ahead and move on in our program. You're welcome to stay with us, Ryan, if you're available. Love to have you. Otherwise, yeah.
Matt, did you share the agenda on Google Drive this month? Because I usually see it when I log in, and I don't see it.
Yep, it's there. Let me Um, I will make sure. Yeah, you have access.
Okay.
Um, okay, next item for business. Let's again swapping things. We have a guest, one of our volunteer data scientists who've been helping analyze the results of the survey. So let me promote Brian to be a panelist, have him join us, and let's cover that. As a reminder, there were two surveys that were done concurrently, the ARPA survey and then the annual town citizen satisfaction survey. Um, uh, we're not going to be covering tonight the ARPA survey. Brian and Marianne have already presented the ARPA survey to the ARPA committee and that results, et cetera. We're going to be focusing on tonight the second annual town satisfaction survey and their initial analysis of it. So turn it over to you, Brian, and make sure you have presenting rights.
Yeah, can you guys hear us and see us okay?
Yep, we
Yes.
can.
Excellent. So let me start my screen share here. Okay. All right, yeah, thanks for having us and for the opportunity to work on this. So this is just a first look. We'll certainly have a more detailed analysis, but we definitely wanted to be able to give you a high level overview of some of the work that we've been doing so
Oh,
far.
I fixed it. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, just for a quick background, I think everyone knows this, but I'm Brian, this is Marianne. And, we were working with this satisfaction survey for Southborough. So overall, I mean, again, we see that most residents are satisfied with the town and their perception of the different services and things that they have in town. They feel that's a great place to raise children with good schools, and there's supportive programs, especially around public safety and social services. Some of the areas for improvement, again, we saw a common theme with the lack of transparent communication provided by the town. Some complaints about poor conditions in physical spaces, such as like roads, both in sidewalk repair and installation of sidewalks in areas of the town where there are no sidewalks, and other public areas, such as some of the common fields and things like that.
A question on this slide, by the way, if anybody has questions along, I encourage you to go do it as Brian walks through this. This more satisfaction and less satisfaction, is that to indicate for this given survey, there's less satisfaction and sort of, or was that to signal a trend from previous year to this year, that there's a change?
Yeah, that would mainly be in regards to this specific 2022 survey. So it's difficult to get really a trend from two data points of 2021 and 2022. We could certainly, we don't have that data here today, but we could certainly show you how things are changing between last year and this year. But it's difficult to say if that really constitutes like a trend per se.
Yeah.
Sorry to be too technical, but all right.
I'm all for it.
So this year we had a total of 510 respondents. So that's about 5 to 6% of the town. Total questions were 157. So that was pretty similar. I think actually one more than last year. Completion rate, again, we saw a pretty steep drop off, but 58 to 60% rounding up really isn't too bad, I would say. I think what was nice this year is residents had the option to skip questions that they maybe weren't so interested in responding to. So they were able to just kind of skip along and answer some of the later questions. And yeah, I mean, so this is basically here is a plot of starting off at the first question, going on to the last question, how the drop off rate is. And you can see that certainly some questions, I'm not exactly sure like what question this was, but had maybe some residents who were less interested in answering that one and just wanted to move on.
I also think with this one, some of the free responses had fewer answers. And so with fewer answers, you would see a drop off there.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And also, if we want to compare these specific data points to last year, there were around almost like 50 to 60 more respondents, which increases almost like 1% of residents responding. And I think what has been advertised this year with the mailer, there has been an increase in those respondents as well.
Yeah, definitely a pretty solid increase. So I think the shift to doing the mailers certainly had a big impact. So looking a little bit at just the high level demographics for respondents' age, it tends to be people who were majority were over 55. So respondents who were say under 55 were in the minority on this, especially those who were in like the 25 to 34 range or but pretty good breakdown overall. As far as the race demographics, so again, not surprisingly, given the town's demographics, overall respondents were white, but we did have some representation from those who were of Asian and Pacific Islander background, as well as some other, and a decent percentage of people who just failed to respond or preferred not to identify with the question. And with gender, same thing. There was a portion of people who preferred not to identify, but the majority then were female, but pretty good representation from male respondents as well.
It'd be interesting to see how this how it relates to actual town demographics. So I can discuss with Mr. Haggerty to see what demographics we have to see, are the people who responded to the survey, are they basically representative of the town's demographics? So
Yeah, that would be an interesting comparison to make. I don't have the data for the actual town demographics, but for sure, if you wanted to make some kind of comparison to see how that representation breaks down, that would be pretty interesting.
So with this specific slide as well, we see a greater diversity of race than last year. Last year it was almost 80 to 90% white versus 78% this year. And then with gender, there was a greater proportion of the population that preferred not to identify. And in addition, with age as well, last year, many more respondents were older, where there was a surge of those under the age of 45 that responded to this survey this year.
nice.
Okay, moving on. Yeah, like we said on the intro, so definitely many of the residents felt that Southborough is a great place to raise children. They felt like there was overall pretty good value and quality of life. Some concerns about tax dollars and fees in the town, especially as it relates to the value that they're perceiving for their tax expenditure. Concerns as well about town communication. I think there's quite a few options that were presented on the survey for town communication, but it seemed like residents preferred maybe specific types of communication, and we'll get into that in a little bit in a later slide. Yeah, I think there was some talk at the beginning of this call about greater ethical transparency and broader effective communication.
What is
take
ethical
more.
transparency?
So here in the survey, there were questions regarding how ethical our town leadership was, whether they were satisfied to not being satisfied at all. And then transparency as well is also whether they believe town leadership was transparent or not transparent. And here they would like to see both at the same time. So we really just put together. So to have really greater, depending on what the definition is of ethics that the town aligns on, I think there's just greater ethics here than greater transparency as well.
And transparency, I think, really relating to the town's people's ability to perceive and understand the decision-making process at the leadership level. So I think there was some, certainly I'll be getting into the text analysis and sharing that information. I think there's a lot of good information in the open responses that can be sort of broken down. But it really related more to the decisions the town leadership is making and why they're making it. I got the sense that the survey respondents didn't have a good understanding of why some of these decisions were being made or how they were being made.
Well, can you give me an example of unethical transparency?
The survey didn't ask, it didn't provide examples of ethical versus unethical. It just gave the wording ethical. How ethical do you think, as a respondent, the town is? And so it's left to the interpretation of the individual responses as what do they think ethics is, and as well as transparency. So I don't think we're going to be going there. What's useful for this committee is not defining ethics, but is useful is I'd love to have us brainstorm about if there are technological means to helping citizens engage in both understanding and being able to understand how decision making is happening, as well as bi-directional communication and feedback to the town. Feel like they are, if they do have feedback, that feedback is taken, into account or recognized, as opposed to just being acted upon, and not
Yeah.
heard. Your voice isn't heard. So, yeah, something to
Yeah.
sort of brainstorm. Any of the findings here that Brian is presenting, I'd love to think about what can we do as a committee to recommend to pair Brian and Marianne's findings and say, look, here's a known problem. We've got a good portion of town residents saying this is a problem, and here's something we as a technology committee are recommending that maybe help a little bit solve that problem.
That's fair.
Should we do that brainstorming now, or that'll be later, or what?
After the presentation, let's get through the presentation, and it's not going to be, we're not going to conclude it tonight anyway, but something we should start now.
I would take out the word ethical, but okay, let's move on.
Sure. I mean, these aren't my opinions. These are simply just the wording in the survey that townspeople were presented with. So, that's why we're using them.
To be also clear, none of our opinions are in this. We are just fairly summarizing and giving the analysis of the survey that we are given.
Okay.
Similar to last year, there was very high satisfaction with police, fire, and EMS. So quite a few people said they maybe didn't have a personal experience with that, but if they did, they were satisfied with response times. Overall opinion of those services was relatively high. Similar for behavioral health, social services, the library, and recreation. These were pretty high satisfaction rates as well. So on the whole, townspeople were quite happy with these services in town.
You go, Brian.
Yeah, just happy to share that with you. So, all right. So there were a couple of interesting questions about ranking top ways that townspeople wanted to engage and have input with the town decisions. So top 2 communication choices were that they would like to see in the next 2 years were primarily through email or the town's website. There were a number of other options such as Facebook, online blogs like My Southborough, and a couple I'm probably not remembering, but it seems that email and the town website were the 2 primary standouts for that question.
By the way, just for the committee's knowledge, that was a deficiency we had in our survey last year, which was we just simply asked, how satisfied are you with these forms of communication? And that question, and then which ones do you use on a regular basis? We never actually asked the question. I can't remember whether somebody from advisory or select board recommended, hey, we should ask a question of which form of communication do people prefer? Because you potentially can infer that from the other questions, but it's actually a different question. How satisfied they currently are and which ones they use. It's a different question of which they prefer. So this year is the first year we added a question of which ones they prefer. And so it's good to have this data.
Yeah. All right, moving on. So as far as funding priority, there was a question basically allowing residents to rank their preference of funding priority for projects. We could do a ranked choice similar to the ARPA survey that we did, but I'm not sure that it's honestly necessary unless there's some plans to do like multiple of these, for example. But far and away, the leader was road paving improvements and sidewalk maintenance or sidewalk installation. So those 3 or 2 were really the big standouts, followed by police body camera program, and then the 3 field projects came in last there.
Were these limited, Brian, to the DPW projects where we gave them? No.
Yeah,
so what else was included in here?
I think these are all the ones that were included. I could be wrong, but context is last year we had DPW submitted a list of capital projects in ranked order. This year we moved it away from DPW, and I worked with a capital planning committee, and the capital planning committee supplied me a list of projects, and we have a dedicated section just for capital planning. So these are purely the ones that they wanted to put on the list.
Came from capital.
Yeah. And likewise, so I think after this, Brian and Marianne, I'll have a discussion with chair of the capital planning committee to find out. First of all, I think they would love to have a presentation on the results of this particular question and discuss what sort of an analysis they'd be looking for, but we can discuss that after.
Yeah, definitely. And there were some interesting responses in the open response related to this as well. So a lot of those regarding the road paving and improvements and people making comparisons to neighboring towns as well.
Oh, so much.
So definitely people are passionate about the road, it seems. So
The body cam answer, was that something that was on the survey, or was that something that people came up with on their own?
no, that was a choice that they were given on the survey.
That's right.
Okay, I mean, are we advocating for body cams? Is the
capital planning
police
committee
department?
listed, the capital planning committee listed it as an option they wanted to see in the survey, so we included it.
Okay,
It's something that capital planning, I guess, is considering. And so they wanted to find out what residents want, so we included it.
okay.
All right. There were a couple questions related to concern about the environment and a couple projects related to that. So first one, I believe, was about a climate action plan to reduce Southborough's greenhouse gas emissions. And the second one was related to resiliency of stormwater infrastructure. So in general, there was positive feedback as far as coming up with action plans for both of these. I think what I found most interesting is that the stormwater one was generally, yes, I support that, couple negatives, but it was a trend decreasing with mostly support. The climate action plan kind of was a bimodal distribution. It was interesting in that most people said, yeah, I support that. Then there was a small amount of people that were neutral, and then there was a bit of an increase in people who were vehemently opposed, I would say. So it seems like it's a topic it seems that people have strong opinions about, even if they aren't necessarily in agreement about it.
We say bimodal and basically almost polarized opposites.
Yes, exactly.
Either very in favor of it or very against.
Yeah. In general, on the whole, it was, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would say most in favor of the stormwater infrastructure, many in favor of the greenhouse action plan, but certainly a little more controversy related to the climate action plan.
So there are two questions around the action plan and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So when you combine those two questions together, the bimodal effect really goes away. But when you see them separately, you see the bimodal effect there.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe there's some strong feelings around the words greenhouse gases or
Right.
climate change and things like that. So
There wasn't any mention of the town dump, was there? The Southborough dump that has been discovered.
I don't believe so. Not that I recall.
It was not
Okay.
a question, nor did I see it on the free responses.
Okay.
There was a set of questions relating to where Southborough residents tend to do things. So where they grocery shop, where they go to restaurants, where they go to the gym, shopping, these sorts of things. Pretty similar to last year. Again, I don't know that much has changed as far as building a new grocery store in town. So most residents are going to restaurants and grocery stores in neighboring towns, as well as retail shopping, entertainment, personal services, things like that. The one standout that I do recall, where again we saw this last year, but residents tend to get their healthcare needs met in Southborough. So there were some positive feelings around that. But of these choices, it seems like grocery stores was the biggest preference as far as needs to be met in Southborough. So if there was one of these to focus on development, it seems like residents would prefer it to be a grocery store.
Yeah, really? You're talking about a grocery store of what size, I guess?
Yeah, again, I don't want to necessarily give my opinion or
It
get
doesn't,
into.
it doesn't say, the survey just simply says grocery store.
Yeah,
Okay.
survey said
That's
grocery
all.
store. I can say that I saw in some of the free responses that people were missing. I think this predates my time in the town, but there maybe used to be like some kind of farm or small like community farm type grocery store. But it seemed like some residents were interested in something more along those lines, like a little more personal, a little smaller, a little more local, not necessarily like a big box type of grocery store.
Hmm.
All right. So just in summary, some recommendations that we might have is continue to increase engagement with the town. So we don't have to get into the brainstorm in a second, but in relation to what you were saying about brainstorming how to use these survey results and sort of engage with the town and increase transparency, I think this right here is a great way to increase transparency. The People are discovering things maybe they didn't know about the town when they're being asked about their satisfaction with it. But it's also giving them the sense of that their opinions are valued and that they're getting used for something as well, especially if they see some results from the survey information that they put in. We might like to see some kind of like focused surveys as well, in addition to the overall annual satisfaction survey, but maybe it would be interesting to do really brief, like quarterly or something along those time frame, like 10-ish question survey. It'd be interesting to see how like turnout is for that. So I know we're increasing based on last year with the mailers, but it would be interesting to know if we could really get a bigger number of households and get bigger participation with a more focused survey.
So the second bullet point really reflects on as I reflect on surveys that I have analyzed and different data sets. We look at the health and retirement survey, we look at the US Census. They usually have specific focus for those years that are not of the years that they had the census, for example, and they have focus areas. So maybe that's something that we could think about doing. Not sure what the interest would be there, but that is something that
Yeah,
is.
I like that. And if there's some way we could easily chop this up and make it more digestible over the course of the year, as opposed to one time big bang, that's a painful, I'll be the first to admit this is a painful survey. And we need to somehow figure out how to make it more digestible. I do really like the idea of complementing a periodic or a quarterly or something or annual survey with a certain increased or actually starting to do surveys as touch points, which is each and every touch point. Like we should have a mini survey, satisfaction survey, 1 or 2 questions max
Right.
for every touch point, every interaction a citizen has. So at the bottom of every town employee's email message, the signature should say, how can we improve? Click here.
Yeah.
Or not even click there. It should be like writing with the message, 1 through 5 stars or frowny face, smiley face. How do we do simple interaction so that we maximize how much data we're getting back?
Hey, Matt, one issue about the short surveys like that. When I get short surveys like that from, I don't know, from my insurance company, I don't click on that link for a very good reason. And that is I don't really know if that's a link that I should click on. So, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but unfortunately, the mechanics of having a link in an email that came from somebody you don't normally correspond with can be pretty tricky.
Yeah,
I would think that
people are advised not to click on links in
Yeah.
email if they don't know them. But
I think that's a problem relevant to a short or a long survey. I mean, if they're not trustworthy to click on a short survey, they're not going to click on the satisfaction lengthy survey either.
Well, they might. I mean, what you might say is that there's a satisfaction survey. Go to the town website and you can
click on the
find it
link
there. But
yeah.
yeah,
the
but
challenge is that every additional step you inject in the process will reduce the participation rate.
I understand, but I'm not going to click on links in strange emails.
Well,
Just
the question is
because of
strange-
security issues.
Well, agreed. That is a concern. We need to figure out how to provide better security and assurance to our users that these are official emails, so that
if we can solve that, I think we've got a few $1 trillion idea there.
You can email from if you've applied for a permit from the town, if you've engaged the town. Once again, typically these are engaged because the user has engaged, the citizen is engaged. I've applied for a permit, or I've asked the question of the clerk. Their response back to me, as part of the response back to me, as part of your permit is approved, at the bottom is here's a link, click, how did I do? I think those are more trustworthy because it's all initiated by the user. It's not just some random email saying, click on this link. So I think, I think it's the best we can do. And I think, likewise, if I know I've used the town permit system when we applied for a permit for finishing our basement. And yes, it sent me an email and, click on this link to log into the permitting system. So yeah, I clicked on the link because I knew I had initiated the interaction and it was trustworthy because, I knew, I was expecting an email, I was expecting a link. So anyway.
And these are fair ideas. I mean, we could definitely have that for the brainstorming session later. But just to close this out as well, we wanted to, we also heard from like some of the free responses, like, what are the results from the survey? Like, what are we like making the decisions that reflect the town's input? So some of the things that really surfaced from it were, visible infrastructure, road and sidewalk improvements, and also thinking about a better form of communication with like important town subjects, with the two methods of communication that most preferred, which was email or through the post or through the town's website. There was a question, I do remember, if like people use the town's website a lot, and there were not many responses to it. However, when the question that came up for what is your most preferred ways or two ways of communication, email and town website came up. So we just thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if that's aspirational.
There.
Like, if we had a decent website, I'd love to use it.
Yeah, I think there were some comments on people would like to see the website improve. It's a little bit, you go to one page and it looks a little different versus another page and things like that. So maybe if the website was a little bit more cohesive and easier to use, you might see more people preferring to use it. But, I don't want to infer too many opinions there.
I had a question in the analysis that you've done on this one so far, and I know this is still early. Have you seen any statistically significant or possibly significant shifts in any particular area from the last survey? Did anything stand out of saying, oh, this is way different than last time?
Not really. I mean, there were questions that weren't on the survey from last year to this year and vice versa. So those were different. Mm-hmm. But for those questions that were the same and of the same sentiment, we didn't really see a shift there. That also includes a shift in demographics that we saw. There wasn't a large shift there either in terms of responses.
Thanks.
Going back to the website, I know that's something that Angela has done work with the ARPA committee in proposing. Maybe that's the whole project. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Angela.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we did hear about this in the first survey. And so it, created the opportunity for us to research it a little bit. We did talk to a company that specializes in local government websites. We put in a request to the ARPA committee to obtain funding to essentially redo the website. And if we get that approval, I think there's a lot that we could potentially do. We talk about both email and town website. Imagine if people could subscribe to different topics on the website. They could get agendas proactively. We could link them back to collaboration sites where if they had questions or comments, they could comment on those types of topics before the committees actually meet, so that there's a mechanism for providing feedback proactively. I still think that the hardest part is we've got a lot of demographics in town. We know certain demographics don't really want to deal with technology as much as others. So I don't think it's kind of a one size fits all. I still think we're going to have to work with the people that are in the committees and make sure that they feel comfortable leveraging the technology. And one just thought that comes to mind is I know some of the Board of Selectmen actually go out to specific places and sit and meet constituents on certain days. Think if you could do that virtually, and you could have both an in-person session, but then maybe you partner that with a virtual session. You're really covering a lot more ground. You're opening up those sessions for people who maybe have kids and can't get out to local places as easily. So I still think we've got to partner it with different solutions, but I really hope that based on this data, it is a push for ARPA to give us the funding for at least that project, if not some of our others as well.
Yeah, I love that. If you could use, especially if you could use comment on that, what Andrew said. If we can use data from this that Brian and Marianne are presenting right here, as well as from a previous, this basically the town has told us not once, but twice, here is a key area, and it's not just about improving website. It's solving about a major concern that
Absolutely.
that the town folk have with being able to participate in government. Like we don't create websites just to create websites, right? It's all about improving participation, understanding what's going on, and increasing a bidirectional interaction between leadership and the citizens. And I love your thoughts on both, yeah, both improving the websites as well as other means to do so. Anyway, all I'm saying is maybe we can amend the proposal to ARPA to say, yet again, we've heard that this is important because of these reasons, and solving this problem. It's not just redoing website, it's solving this business problem. Sorry,
Angela,
that's all.
one quick question. When you were researching this issue, did you get any estimates of how much it would cost to redo the website top to bottom?
Yes. Yeah, it was in the, I mean, we got high level estimates at this point, and it was in the 50 to 80K range.
Okay.
And a lot of that, of course, depends on the type of functionality that we want and, all those different features. But based on, some basic subscription features, basic collaboration, some things like that, that's what the gentleman that I spoke to was kind of in the vicinity of. I do think if we get approval, we'd have to go out and talk to more groups. And, they did recognize we could probably go to a Boston-based firm and the quote would probably be double that. So it probably depends a little bit on who we're dealing with and getting a range of quotes. But there were some more local companies that were, I think, willing to do it for more of a reasonable rate.
Now, 50 to 60 would be an initial cost. And then what about maintenance?
Ongoing maintenance, they had a plan. It was like 10K per year for ongoing, just little tweaks. And they had the SaaS hosting with it, and they supplied all the infrastructure and those components.
Would their site, would it be one that could be taken over by another firm if they should go out of business?
He did talk about transition, and I believe that the answer was yes, but again, it was a very preliminary conversation, so I wouldn't say that we got down to every detail of how all of that would work.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of the specific use cases that you were talking about. I'm a little bit less in favor of sort of a top to bottom redo for the sake of a redo. But if we can add functionality, key functionality, that'd be great.
One thing we may consider, this is just kind of brainstorming here. We have a lot of talented people in town who may be willing to volunteer their time, including web designers. And it's very common for websites to be built on some platform, a CMS, a content management system, WordPress, Joomla, etc. And both of them have extensive, hundreds or thousands of modules built for various industries and government, etc., and so forth. So basically, there's existing modules you can install on a WordPress, and manage WordPress as a service or Joomla as a service. So that the security, the hosting is handled by some company, and then the basic configuration could be handled by potentially a volunteer spending time, and then of course ongoing management could be done by the respective departments. That's one of the things I'm hoping we can do with the new site is have a distributed role-based access control so that each department, committee, and board can manage the content of their respective section. Because right now, there's only a couple people in town that have to manage each and every section, and that's specifically the reason why several departments and boards have gone out and found basically created their own completely independent website because they have no control on the existing Civic Plus system of managing their own content. So they go register their own domain name and decide their thing. So the more we can sort of make it, interactive, collaborative, you can own your own board's content, the better.
So, it seems to me you just identified a problem that we've talked about a number of times, but I'm not comfortable with the assumption that that's the problem that our residents are seeing and complaining about in surveys like this. I mean, clearly the fact that each department and committee potentially creates its own website is obviously a bad thing, and it also creates usability issues and a number of other things. But I guess one of the things that I'm uncomfortable about at this point, and I'm not at all arguing with the fact that we need to do something or we should do something with the website, is I'm not comfortable with any analysis that we actually know what problems we want to solve and what we want to fix and what the issues are that people have with the website. It's easy to say, the website isn't very good in a survey, but it strikes me that if we're really serious about spending big bucks on a website, we need to dive deeper before we jump, because we don't actually have a lot of information about why.
The process that the company described actually had a, kind of a phase one that was more of a discovery phase, where they would actually go out to seek to interview people at a much deeper level, specifically about like what was working with the website, what wasn't working with the website, kind of do the whole, persona identification. What do these different personas need? That was really kind of the phase zero before anything started getting built. And that is one reason why I do tend to lean more towards having this done through a professional company versus just volunteers who are kind of trying to do it in magic time. I think you have to go through that deep dive process of really getting the core requirements defined, really making sure we understand what the actual use cases are, and then build the system based on that. And it is time intensive. I mean, it's a good piece of work.
Well,
Okay.
I guess, to build on what Larry said, I mean, I think one key thing we really need to say is, what is the traffic that we're currently seeing, and what is the traffic that we think we would see if we redid the website? I mean, we can easily get into building a much better website, but we can also get into a lot of issues and problems with it, and also a real tremendous maintenance problems on the back end. So I agree with Larry. I think, this is going to require quite a bit of analysis before we take a leap.
And it sounds like at least the solution that Angela's been proposing includes that as part of the process, which, I think, we haven't had a proposal yet, so we don't really know the real details. But it sounds like whoever Angela has spoken to does agree that we need to actually determine what the problem is before we go solve it. And that's all I was really pushing.
Yeah, I would have a question then, is that if you ask someone to go out and tell you, is there a problem that you can solve? The answer generally comes back, yep, there's a problem I can solve for you. And, I would just say, we'd want to make sure that we weren't getting the answer that they preferred us to get.
Yeah, that's not, we definitely completely agreed. That we're not just saying, go create a nice website and build some cool features, right? Yeah, we would need to provide greater guidance, and sounds like built into their plan, they would have some test and learn, etc. We do know from the survey that people are interested in having better, high level business needs is people are interested in having more transparency. What does that mean? Well, maybe as part of the project, you discover what does more transparency mean. Looks like Mr. Litt has a comment.
Oh, a couple of things on this website tack that you're going down. First, I agree that there's a lot of room for improvement with the town website. But it's also the case that I don't think anybody in town really understands the capabilities of the Civic Plus platform. It is a content management system. It does have division of privileges. It is possible to sign up for notifications. There's a whole collection of things that it does have. The subject came up at another committee meeting with Jason, and he said that he and I have both noticed that virtually every town in the Commonwealth that has a website is using the Civic Plus platform. And Jason went out and talked to a couple of towns that didn't. And the responses he got back were, I moved off of Civic Plus and I was sorry about it. Or I'm trying to do something, as you call it, with magic effort and volunteer stuff. And this is a business critical program. And the idea of handing it off to a bunch of volunteers, I mean, it works great as long as the volunteer is one of us, but it doesn't work so well when we want to hand it off to the next person or someone else. So, I mean, I think before one jumps off this pier, it's important to really understand what we have and what capabilities we're not using because we don't understand them, as opposed to just because what we see today makes us unhappy, let's go off and develop something entirely new.
I think that makes sense. And I think they should be part of the quoting process to be able to give us a good estimate of what they could do on the current platform.
I mean, I think it's also worth understanding, you know,
when you
they
say
have training.
When you say a quoting process, to get a quote, you've got to have some specifications as to what you want done. Do we have that?
At a high level, I think we would have to write an actual RFI or RFP in order to, you know, take it out to other companies. So there would definitely be some prep work that we would need to do before I think we could hand it over to groups and ask them to give us, you know, hard estimates.
And I'm sure that we can find companies that will, you know, provide really good service and build a bang up website. I wonder, do we really need it? Would be one question, and then two, you know, what about the back end maintenance? And I think Tim's point, this is a mission critical application. You know, it's got to be done in a way that addresses that as well. But that would be all I'd say.
I don't think anybody's against creating it on the current platform if that's a viable platform that serves the requirements that we're talking about.
Well, I mean, I think it would be worth taking, you know, your ideas of what the requirements are and trying to find out, you know, what is it that is truly a deficiency of the platform, as opposed to what is it because, you know, it was not selected by a group of technologists in the first place. It was maintained by a guy initially who had 9 million other things to do in his day and barely managed to get through the training once, and didn't follow up with the support issues that have been raised. I mean, I've got some that have been floating around for a long time. So, I mean, I'm not a fan particularly of Civic Plus, but I do think it's important to understand the difference between, you know, the platform doesn't do it, and we haven't learned what the platform capabilities are, and we haven't exploited them. And
all I really want is a bunch of RSS feeds that I can pull into my RSS reader. 'Cause that's how I read everything anyway.
Well, you know, it does have RSS feeds.
Okay, let's go over to Marianne and Ryan. I think you have a comment.
No, I actually got that reference. So with that, the one area we were just thinking about as we were sidebarring here is, are there opportunities publicly for Southborough residents to do a walkthrough of the website? Just have a couple of sessions of like, oh, we're doing a walkthrough of the website. Would you be interested in doing so? Maybe there'll be a Zoom meeting to do so. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe just helping townspersons understand how to utilize what's already there better might improve satisfaction with it.
Basically, a usability study. Say, what would, you know, you start by saying, what would you expect to be on a town website? Now, go ahead, walk through it, try to do it. You know, what was out of place? I mean, it's basically a usability user experience.
I don't think we offer anything like that today. I mean, it's definitely something we've talked about with having more technology training and stuff like that, but it's not a routine program that I'm aware of that exists today. I don't know, Matt, if you're aware of any other groups that are.
No, there's not. So I would propose one of the action items here is I could see if I could find UXR, user experience researcher, and in town who's willing to volunteer some time, act as a volunteer consultant. And one of the things we did on this most recent survey is I added a question for people if they'd be willing to share their email address, of course, privately for follow-ups, etc. So we do have some email addresses, and we can, if I found a user experience researcher, maybe willing to start collecting, you know, information or do some sessions with individuals on their experience with the existing and finding a clear list of things that can be that they would like to see changed. And hopefully, for Mr. Litt, hopefully we can just toggle a flag, we can enable a feature on Civic Plus, and magically we have it, and it looks like something from 2020 and not 2010 or 2002.
I can ask Jay if we have a contact, like a company rep or something that we could talk to that might be able to give us an overview and talk about,
of the
you know, what we
capabilities,
have
yeah.
on our platform and, you know, what have we not done that we could do. So, I mean, there's definitely some opportunities there.
I think that's a great idea. We should do a current state, and we could also do a future state and do a gap analysis, and then try and figure out if Civics Plus can do it. But I guess the other issue would just be, I think there are a lot of icebergs in these waters, and I would just I'd say we want to be damn sure that we really think this is the defining project that the Municipal Technology Committee should take on, because it's going to be very labor intensive.
Well,
we
again,
also have to get funding. I mean, haven't been
that's true.
given the approval yet, so I don't know
Yeah.
where ARPA is going to land on what
so-
will actually get approved and what won't.
So either way, I mean, I think there's a lot of technologists in town willing to volunteer. And this is the way I view that the MTC can scale is by leveraging technologists who are willing, who have expertise in a variety of areas, who are willing to lend their time and like to do so. So, I don't think there's any additional effort, apart from our discussion time here. It's not necessarily additional time from us individually. And I think it's sort of a win-win situation that we can leverage them to help provide the direction, and hopefully we get funding, and either hopefully we get the funding or Civic Plus has some flags that we can features we just enable to solve the needs we have and have a solution. Okay. Anything else, Brian or Marianne? I think was that the last slide.
Yeah, we stopped sharing after the last slide there. So we'll certainly dig into it more. But if there's any suggestions as far as like specific areas that you would like to see a deeper analysis, that would definitely be helpful to further guide us.
Okay. One of the
Thank
things
you
I'd
very
love to,
much.
yeah, thank you so much for all your work on this. One of my things I would hope to prepare for and this is sort of leads in the next discussion, is preparing for town meeting. Basically pulling some takeaways. And Angela, who's preparing both slides as well as, I don't know if Angela, if you want to handle the trifold again this year, I can handle through the website that correlates with. But basically, what are the key things we want to take away, specifically around technology, and highlight within the trifold / presentation for town meeting. And yeah.
I sent out, and it was literally right before the meeting, so I don't think anybody's had a chance to see it yet, but I did send out a revised version of the brochure and a draft version of the slides. I think I understand, Matt, that we have like 3 minutes of presentation time at the beginning of the town meeting.
2 3 minutes. Yeah,
2 to 3 minutes.
requested.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I literally have like 3 slides that I drafted. It's like, what is the MTC? What progress have we made this year? What's next? It's like bare bones given the time that we have. But now that we have the analysis from the second survey, I think I'd like to go back and try to see what would be really helpful is if we have any really powerful text comments, if it would be, if we could get some of maybe even a handful, like 5 of the most powerful comments that people made in the survey that are directly about the technology needs or the communication needs that people have. I think that would be a great addition to the slides.
I could take that as an action item because I know
do you have
Brian
the verbatims?
I have the verbatims.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so Brian and Marianne will be focusing on the deeper dive.
Okay.
That's something I could do. I could read comments and I can then send you some of those around the tech. That would be helpful. Yeah.
Because town meeting's next week, right? It's the 4th and the 5th, so we don't have a lot of time.
Next week?
Yes.
Wow.
And the brochure, I tried to keep a little bit more generic because we also have to take that to like the Kinko's and get it actually made. And I'm still missing a nice in color headshot for both Ryan and Joe. So if I could get that like as soon as you log off tonight or early tomorrow morning, I can make any final edits. And then that gives me a couple of days to get the brochure printed because they do usually take like 48 hours to get that done. The slides, I think we can keep iterating on a bit. But if everybody could just take a look at what I sent through and then send me any feedback, I can do another version. And then, I think we'll be ready for town meeting for the 3 minutes that we have at the beginning of the meeting.
Question, how many people do you think are going to be there at town meeting?
I mean, there's been big crowds the last few years.
They're moving it to Algonquin because they think it's going to be bigger than
Well,
part of your command.
I thought they were moving it to Algonquin because of the spacing, the social distancing issue more than the crowd.
I think
There's a big issue about inside versus outside, and I think they
That's
it on inside.
right with spacing, which means that you need, for a particular size crowd, you need a much bigger auditorium. Generally, at least, like the last one I attended, the special town meeting, I think there were only 200 or 300 households represented at most.
I think that's fairly common.
So we've got about 2,500 households in this place in Southborough. So, it's funny when people say, well, I want more, opportunity to participate in town government. And then you go to meetings like this one, or you go to meetings like public accessibility or, many, and you don't see a lot of people, even though they could be viewing or they could be participating.
Childcare is always an issue, and I know they've offered that in the past, but I think there were some issues where they were not offering it for some of the meetings, and I heard a lot of people talking online about that being an issue. And we did talk about the idea of whether you could like have remote voting, and Mr. Hegarty said that was not allowed by law, given our type of government, that there was no way that we were able to do that.
Well, remote voting also has a lot of technical issues with it as well, and also cost if you're going to solve those technical issues. But I'm a little skeptical, to tell you the truth, about, when people say, of course I want to participate more. And, we're talking about childcare for maybe one night a year or 2 nights a year. That's not a huge ask, right?
You wouldn't think so. I mean, I just know that like a lot of young families, given the sports schedules and all the activities that kids have, I think it's harder when you have younger children. At least it was for me. I mean, now my daughter's older, so I'm free. I can do what I want. But when she was younger, it was probably a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. So thank you, Angela, for all your work on those things. I haven't looked at it yet. My general hope would be, when we present, rather than, as much as possible, we say, yeah, here's what the MTC does, but here's not what our progress is. But let's present it in the context of here's what progress the town is making towards the strategic tech plan. So it's less about our progress as opposed to the town's progress towards the 5-year goal. Because that's what we are. We're developing a plan for the town, not just for our own committee meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I'll make those changes. But yeah, please, everybody, if you could take a look at it and send me any feedback, and then we can do another version of it.
Okay. Do you want to, is anything else any other questions for Brian or Marianne?
If I can make one final comment on the survey quantity and frequency, a number of people I've talked to have survey fatigue because of the number of surveys that have come out from the town, whether it's, youth and family services or the library or MPC and so on. And so, well, I understand, Matt, your desire to get more frequent feedback at touch points. I think if we want to get people to respond, it's going to be important to directly tie, the result of answering a survey to something that the town actually does. And so there ought to be, we have to find a way for, when the DPW paves the street, for the DPW to come back and say, we got this feedback, from the DPW survey or the MPC survey or something, and this is what happened. Because otherwise, fatigue will overwhelm, even an annual survey, and people will treat it like I treat all the feedback, when I buy something online, which is leave me alone, go away.
Yeah. Great point. Great point. In fact, that's maybe something, Angela, we should include in our presentation slide for town meeting, is saying, basically thank the residents for their participation in the survey. And because, here are the findings and here are the takeaways that will be worked on or have been worked on, or et cetera. Yeah. I love the point. I think we mentioned that earlier in this meeting, of the more people can see that their actions, their input, their voice has been heard, they've been seen, their opinions matter, the more they will feel like the town is responsive and the town cares, and that it will be more these other questions that we've had to answer, about decision-making process, that they will feel better that the town is reacting, and it's much more participatory government, which is what they're asking for. So I like that. In terms of the survey, one comment on the survey itself. Again, I know people have had survey fatigue. One of the purposes of the combined survey, though, is indeed actually, and it's counterintuitive, to reduce survey fatigue, because with the fact that we're asking a bunch of demographics questions, means with the combined survey, various different departments and committees can have these questions answered, and be sort of a fixed cost for answering those demographics questions, and that we can then do correlation with any of the other responses. Whereas if each and every department, like fire and police, were to do their own surveys and to include demographics questions, that would be even much more for people to respond to. And so it's actually, there has been an intention here to save people effort by answering demographic questions once, and then fill out, be able to leverage that for all the different departments.
Are the
In fact, we have seen that. I mean, fire did do a survey, police did a survey, library did a survey, youth and family services did a survey, MPC did a survey. I mean, it's wild. And I guess, I can't resist the other point, is that people tend to respond to things that they're upset about. I mean, if you give them a large menu of questions, and you say, gosh, how much time am I willing to invest in what was it, 157 questions? Okay, let me find the things that are causing me the most pain and complain about those. So it might also be worth thinking about, how can we get constructive suggestions in a way other than surveys? I mean, I know how to get a pothole fixed on my street. I send a note to Karen Galligan and send her a picture, and I say, by the way, Karen, I've run into this, and usually within a couple of days, someone fixes the pothole. But
because
that
you
doesn't
happen to
scale.
know the email exactly. How does that scale? That doesn't scale. So yeah, let's figure out a better.
Yeah, the potholes don't scale that much either.
What do you mean?
I mean that, it's not like there are millions of potholes and they're growing by 10% a year here. I understand. I mean, there are things that don't scale, but on the other hand, if people know Karen Gallagher's name and they have a pothole that's bothering them, and they send her an email, I think they probably will get some answers. So,
That's not consistent service. And having people email a specific email address with a photo of a problem, that's in terms of general service management, in the theory of service management, you know, when you're ordering from McDonald's, you don't
but,
call your friend who happens
but
to be
we're
the
not
manager that you know works
McDonald's.
there.
We're not
We,
McDonald's. We're a small
our
town.
government is our government is a service organization,
It is
and we
not
need to provide.
McDonald's.
It
I
is a
just want to
service
say
organization. We need to provide
we have
consistent service. We need to provide better service. Sorry, because we need to provide consistent service amongst all residents. And just because Mr. Litt happens to know an email address gives him an advantage over other, users, that should not be the case, right? So.
Oh, I agree. And what I'm saying is, we ought to have a way on the website to report an issue that, goes into a queue, causes a ticket, gets aged out, gets managed, and all that.
Amen. Amen.
Please don't interpret what I said as suggesting that that's the way it ought to work.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, this is a relatively small town. I mean, I don't know that we have to worry as much about consistency of service as a much larger town would have to worry.
I think I don't know, Marianne or Brian, if you have comments, I think the survey points otherwise. That users are looking for consistent data, consistent service from
I don't
any
think
department.
hold on.
Now I know how to fix the pothole that's down the street.
Okay, but hold on just a moment. Did you have any feedback, Marianne and Brian? Did you have any feedback specifically about that people were concerned about the consistency of service? Or were they just concerned that they wanted the pothole fixed down the street?
This is the consistency of what services that our town offers. There is no consistency. People are looking for other things and workarounds to get things done, which is fair. Like, I mean, as the human mind grows and they're trying to fix problems, this is, to be also clear right now, this is just my opinion, and this is also what's in the free responses of the survey.
So what you're saying is there were no people who said that, I'm not getting consistent service. They were saying that I mean, weren't they saying I want better service? They weren't necessarily saying I want consistent service.
And what is your definition of better service then? Because
better service is to fix the pothole. Consistent service is that, that there is some place where I say, I have a pothole in my street and I get some response back automatic that tells me that it will be fixed on this date. I don't know if we need that second.
I got the sense from, sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I got the sense from the free responses that people wanted to be less involved with things getting fixed. So it wasn't that someone wanted maybe to have to send an email or even a ticketing system or whatever. They just wanted to see in general the quality of roads improve, so that these things should just be taken care of without them having to provide input.
Well, I would say you cannot have better service without consistency. I mean, it's a basic network issue, right? Unless you have consistent, you can't have better. You can't have better service.
No foundation or no baseline to really compare to.
Yeah, but when you talk about they want better roads, right? I think very few people in this town drive all the roads and make a note as to how many of the roads are good and how many are bad. They're concerned about particular potholes, and they don't necessarily have any baseline to tell you that 10% or 20% of our roads are bad here.
That's
I think to Brian's point, I have made the observation in the past, when I've reported things like traffic lights that are out and signs that are down and this sort of thing, that I shouldn't have to report them. We have police cars that drive through the entire town all the time. And, why it is that they can't radio something in or make a note and get it taken care of transparently without anyone having to be a whining, complaining nuisance like I am, it escapes me.
Oh.
So, I think, Brian is on the right track in terms of reading this as, gosh, I'd just like to have things work and not have to spend my time complaining about it. But then the second level is, if I have to complain, please make it easy, and please don't make it because you've spent a couple of years developing special knowledge of the right magic email addresses.
Well, I would say, so what you're saying, Tim, is that our fire and our police should have something else in their job description, right?
Well, and
What
I
do you
don't think
mean?
it's unreasonable to ask
Okay, that's fine.
to ask them, as they're looking, for people breaking into houses, to notice that a sign is down or a pothole just developed, and tell people about it. I mean, I'm not trying to make it into a union contract kind of thing, but I mean, why don't you do it? And I don't even want to pick on them. I mean, there was one case where I noticed that we were replacing traffic lights with LEDs, and you would see a pattern of burnout of the LEDs in the thing. And well, hasn't anyone noticed this? And you get, well, no. And then you get, haven't you noticed that the traffic light outside your office that you drive by every day has been out? And it's like,
All right.
well, I keep forgetting to write it down.
Let's go ahead. I know we're behind time. Let's go ahead and move on. I think the citizens have spoken. There's data to show they would like to see improved services in various different areas. I think I'd love to have everybody here and brainstorm and think about, this is just the start of the conversation about how we could use technology to help improve the situation and respond to the asks of citizens. All right, any final comments on the survey before we move on and let Brian and Marianne go? Okay, if not, thank you so much, Marianne and Brian, for all of your work on this. Greatly appreciate the partnership. You guys are awesome. Looking forward to seeing the detailed analysis. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, take care.
Okay, we'll see you. Okay, let's move on. We only have a few minutes left. Review technology status in the town. Mr. Montillo is not able to join us tonight. He's working on testing out the OWL, the meeting room, conference room, camera / microphone / speaker system that can dynamically track based on where the voice is projecting, and it does, zoom in. And as well, I think movement. So it's a 360-degree camera, and so it tracks and serves as a Zoom meeting room camera, and you can link two of them together. And he's working with another meeting that's happening right now and testing them out. We also received, second item is we've received notification that the position that we had, there was a person that he had nominated to fill the second position that he's been recruiting for several months. The person rescinded their acceptance. So we are back to the drawing board. Mr. Montillo is back to the drawing board in terms of hiring. So you need to think about ways we can support him in that. Technical config, Arch config of new servers. Mr. Montillo is quite busy with some other items. I reached out to him to schedule some time with Mr. Provo just to review the architecture from general network architecture as well as security standpoint. And Mr. Montillo has asked that we push out that date, which we are doing. I think, at least from a security review, I'm going to start, unless anybody else has better ideas, given that we don't want Jay to be a sort of a bottleneck. I'm going to start working with the different departments, reach out to different department heads to ask about, start doing a survey of what sensitive data that they interact with and what sort of controls that they are aware of, at least, are in place for protecting that sensitive data, and sort of see if we can understand that the actual, basically survey the data owners themselves as opposed to going through Jay. Any thoughts or comments on those items?
Back on
Very
the
much.
position, Matt, I think last time we were on the, I want to say it was the advisory committee. There was a statement that was made that like if we hadn't filled the position by, X date, that they should go back and review where the salary was sitting and whether we were actually classing the job correctly and paying enough to get a viable candidate. Do we think that this is the time to pull the trigger on that lever, or because how long have we been reviewing candidates? It doesn't
Good
seem like
question.
it's just going to magically get any better.
That's a great question. Let me reach out to the personnel board and advisory and ask about this. I mean, as many recall, we spent quite a bit of time lobbying last summer and fall to make sure the position is as high as possible so that we wouldn't, hopefully wouldn't have this problem. Because we knew that this would be a challenge,
Yeah.
right? We knew that hiring anybody with basic competencies, it's an extremely tight market.
Oh.
And but hopefully this is now the proof to show that look, we've been trying for months and months and months, and it's non-trivial, and maybe this gives justification to be able to bump it up another level. And I don't know how
Do
difficult
we
that
know
is.
why he rescinded his acceptance?
We don't know. We don't know why. No.
What I was about to say is
The personal issues was the
when I saw
statement that he gave Jay.
when I saw Jason's email, my first thought was pretty much the point that Angela brought up. He just got an offer for more money somewhere else, and he took
Yeah,
it.
that's right. He's probably interviewing at multiple places. Our offer came in first and he accepted it, and then he got a better offer right after that and he took it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the follow-up on that is that personnel board, grades the positions. And if you want to, and that goes into the personnel board article for town meeting, which is going to be next week. So if you seriously think that the grading is wrong and we should move it up a level, you're going to run into two obstacles. I mean, one is you have to get the personnel board, to agree and then amend the article at town meeting. And the second is, I'm not sure that Jay was joking when he said, if this position gets regraded higher, his better
Mine
get
needs to.
regraded higher too, because he doesn't want someone working for him, at the same pay level. That's a
It's
management
fair.
issue, but
That's
it's
fair.
also a timing and town meeting, feasibility issue. Because if you don't do it next week at town meeting, unless there's a fall town meeting, it's another year.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Tim.
That's just the process issue.
All right, let me reach out. I know it's a stretch, but
Matt, on the security review, is that the way you phrased it? Is that focused on data security, data handling, or is this all like OPSEC and including concerns like physical security and related?
Yeah, I was planning to basically walk through the NIST cybersecurity framework, CSF, and start asking questions, and basically go through the CSF, and for all the questions there, I figure out which ones that each department head themselves could give me a reasonable answer to without having to go through Jay. So, general answer to the question is all of the above.
Yes. Okay.
But it's going to be limited to what the department heads themselves, from a user / data owner / processing owner, be able to respond to, because they're not going to have a lot of the technical controls, but they will be able to tell me what they're doing. In some cases, physical security, physical location, if they do processing on their local hard drives, whether they use multi-factor authentication to get access to their data, some of those things, but we'll see. Okay. Any other comments on those items? Anything else on the town meeting prep, Angela? I think we've pretty much covered it. Any other final comments on that?
I just need any feedback, ASAP, and I need those headshots pretty quickly and the verbatims. I think those are the three things that I use to get the documents finalized.
Angela, do you have a web headshot for me?
I have one that I don't think is the greatest. So if you have a different one, I'd love to replace it. It was from, I think it was maybe from one of our YouTube meetings or something. Like
Okay, I'll look around and
Yeah.
find one.
Okay. Yeah, anybody who wants their picture changed, just send me a new one and I'll put it on there.
The only problem I've got is I don't have a very good head.
Yeah, let's see here. Let me grab this. Yeah, we just grab a screen capture and go for it.
Let me comb my hair.
And those always come out so well.
They do. This is perfect. Okay. All right. Going back to the agenda, we've already talked about library hotspots. Mr. Warren, any follow-ups or progress on the digital content accessibility proposal that I think the accessibility committee is going to hopefully work on?
I've not been able to work on that, but I have gotten a lot of good input from the last accessibility meeting. A lot of issues were raised about not only, I mean, I was sort of seeing this more as a very small kind of technical issue, but I think Tim Litt and also Mark Purple and some others brought up some really good points about also incorporating some train the trainer activities into this, so that not only, so sort of working both sides, not only some type of system that people can report problems, but also look into ways that for not much money, we can perhaps get some training into town departments, some, let's say, people who could then go out and train other people, and essentially raise our game as well as raise our ability to monitor our game. So I'm incorporating those.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for your work on that. Yeah, looking forward to, and again, no rush. But yeah, looking forward to seeing what you're able to put together. All right. Last item on the agenda to cover was action items. Larry, what do you propose we do in terms of, should we walk through the latest doc, or are there particular items that you'd recommend we
Yeah,
discuss?
I think what we did last month worked okay. It's not like we have 10,000 action items. There's maybe I don't actually know the count, but there's something on the order of a dozen open items, and just walking through them and understanding the status strikes me as being the fastest way to solve the problem.
Okay.
Or address the
Great.
issue.
Let me pull up the most recent action item tracker and discuss and share my screen. Okay. Contractors subject to contract conflict of interest. I said I was going to look into this. When we say contractors, I assume we mean consultants. And I'd actually defer, if we have Mr. Litt still on the line, love to get his opinion of this this question.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. If you're talking about consultants that the MPC appoints, any ethical person is pretty much responsible for identifying any conflict, and they're pretty unlikely, I guess, off the top of my head. I mean, unless you're asking someone to come in and evaluate websites, website platforms, and happens to work for one of the platforms, I mean, that needs to be disclosed. But it's not conflict of interest in the sense of, the state law that applies to members, to municipal employees, because we went to great pains in crafting the consultant agreements to make it clear that a consultant is not a municipal employee.
Yeah. And the benefit, basically, they wouldn't have to attend all the open meeting law things, et cetera. So I think it's basically incumbent on us as we follow under the conflict of interest laws as municipal employees, as board members, to make sure that when we interact and engage consultants, that we make sure and do a query to ensure that there aren't any conflicts of interest like the one the example you gave.
Right. That's correct. And the other thing that is incumbent on you as municipal employees is that when you work with anyone, that includes me for that matter, that you don't fall into the trap of serial deliberation through a third party. That's your responsibility. That's not mine.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we were successfully able to close that one. Executive summary be added to the strategic tech plan.
That's resolved. That's part of the version 5.3, and Jason did add it to the MTC website. So we have the most recent version of that report on the website now as well.
Awesome. All right, next one. I have not yet reached out to the Historical Commission. I still need to do that. Providing personal assistance for online issues. I think the library's actually already done this. So, Mr. Donovan, I'd love to find out about how that's going with these nights, these tech nights, because we as an MTC were discussing possibly leveraging some resources from the Algonquin High School to set up volunteer work. But if I definitely don't want to create a sort of competing program to what you're already doing. So the question, Mr. Donovan, is how can we support?
There are actually
what the
two
library's
programs running, Matt. Both the library is running one and the senior center is running one.
Really? Ryan, are you still on? You stepped away. Okay, we'll continue that discussion.
This is still open.
Okay.
I prioritize the town meeting ahead of that.
Yeah, please. Yeah, that's good. SSO, Jason's looking into that. Scan catalog documents. This is probably something added. It's actually Jason and Angela because you're help facilitate the conversations with Iron Mountain. So, what was the follow-up? Where are we with the discussions with Iron Mountain?
I need to check back in with Mr. Haggerty, but where we had left it after the Iron Mountain presentation is they were going to set up time with him directly, and they were going to come in and talk with him about his digitization and essentially put together a proposal for what it would take to truly move everything online. And I just need to loop back with him and see if that happened and essentially where they stand with that.
Okay. So this is a clear description of volunteer to help MTC address various departments, various initiatives. Let's just leave this one open. I'd still like the idea. The more we can expand the MTC through volunteer consultants, the better. Infrastructure diagram plan is something that will be asked. I'm sure Jason will share that when Joe and I sit down with him. Hopefully, we'll have that. Second internet provider, same thing. That will be part of that same discussion. Ex officio from the school committee. Mr. Litz, I heard there's been some progress on that.
Yes. So I think we're up to the fourth or fifth person, but Ryan O'Leary is their new IT director. I've talked with him about the MTC and given him my orientation thing. We expect that he will be nominated as the ex officio member at the next school committee meeting.
Awesome. And I know Mr. Lavoie. He reached out to me saying he's made progress and he connected you with him. So, and I sort of put a plug into Keith say, hey, look, there's some great synergies here between what town is doing and so forth. So from a sort of school administration standpoint, I think Mr. Lavoy now understands, that, hey, there's some great things that could be improved here and they can leverage. So I think he basically all he say is, I don't think the new rep is going to be on their own, but I think,
I
Mr.
thought Joe
O'Leary,
came from the school committee. Is this a second school committee
this,
representative?
this is an ex officio, basically
This
somebody,
is ex
there is,
officio. Okay,
yeah,
so
which
school
we haven't
committee
had.
has one regular member and one ex officio member. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Ex officio
Clarify
is more
that.
representing that basically the IT department of the schools. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's great. Accessibility, we already covered that. MC member information and terms.
That's still open. I was hoping to get it done before this meeting, but I just didn't.
That's great. No problem. Thanks for working on that.
We have
Low-tech.
two that are coming up in June. I think that's Larry and Angela. I assume both of you want to be reappointed.
Do I have to?
Yes, you do.
Well, if you don't, I'll talk to Eileen.
Actually, am I up for reappointment as well?
No.
I think you were appointed last year, or the previous year, or something like that. Yeah.
Well, but I was sort of backdated.
Yeah,
Let me.
2023 for you, Will.
Oh, okay. Well, it's almost 2023. Come on. Remember, I'm living in the future.
Do
Well,
we
I'm
have to
living
go
in
back in
hyperspace.
front of the select board and stuff again and get revalidated? We don't. No.
No, what will happen, I expect, is that you'll get a note from Mark Purple asking, do you want to be reappointed? You'll say yes. You'll be put on the spreadsheet and a block vote will put you in. The reason for this is were you to decide not to be reappointed, there's a fairly lengthy process involved in finding a replacement. Because first you have to find someone, the appointing authority has to decide that you have a viable candidate or two, the MTC has to provide its input, there has to be a vote. All that can take a couple of months. So the reason for this calendar item is, should someone not be continuing, you need to start that process like last month.
Okay.
So
so
those two are still steps open as well. So we still need to keep those open.
Okay. And then status of .gov giving, I guess we'll wait for Jason on that. All right, I think that is everything for the action items. I know we're over time, but let's, if we could, pull up our calendars to discuss, find a time for next month's meeting. By the way, I think we've already discussed this, but I don't think there's any controversial tech-related articles for town meeting. If there were some controversial tech-related articles, then I would consider maybe we should, meet beforehand to discuss, or something, file post an agenda, etc. But I don't think there are, so I don't think we necessarily need to.
Well, the one concern would be if you decide that you want to do something about the second position based on your conversation.
Yeah, let me see if that's any possibility there.
And I would ask that you not pick Tuesdays as a meeting day, because that overlaps with the Board of Selectmen meetings that I go to and that Jason also goes to.
Okay. Yeah, let's see what people's calendars look like.
I would ask we don't do Wednesdays because I've got other responsibilities there.
Likewise, Wednesdays are hard for me. So Thursday, how do Thursdays look for people?
As long as it's not every third Thursday. Well, or what week are we thinking for May? It's actually provided my wife is fine and I don't get sick. I'm out for 2 weeks. So
On
26th would work.
would 26 work for?
26
26
works.
would be fine, yeah.
26 works for me.
Yeah, that'd be
Let
fine.
me pull up a calendar here. '26. Okay, yeah, I think that that works. 1 second. Yep, that works. Okay, so 26 from 7 to 9 p.m. of May. All right. Any final thoughts before we adjourn? Not. Thank you, everyone. Sorry we went over a few minutes. Greatly appreciate everyone's time. Let's go ahead and I move that we adjourn. Second.
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 Okay, let's go around the room. Will,
Aye.
Barry,
Aye.
Joe,
Yes.
Angela.
Aye.
Likewise. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
See ya.